A small number.
Born in Wales.
So, for the vast majority, a bit of background about Welsh public libraries. There are 22 public library authorities in Wales at the moment. Nearly 300 service points, 14.5 million visits in 12-13. Very, very well used, very well supported. 7% of the population think that libraries are very important or essential to their communities, and 45% have used a library in the last 12 months. Wales are, as I'm sure you know, subject to the 1964 Act in the same way as England. We heard a lot about comprehensive and efficient earlier this afternoon. The bit that often gets missed out is for all persons desiring to make use thereof. And that's important, it's that's comprehensive and efficient for the users. Wales has chosen to go down the route of a national strategy. It's had a national strategy for some years. The most recent is called Libraries Inspire, and that is available on the Welsh Government Command website. It runs out in 2016, so it's got another year and a bit to go. Alongside that national strategy are the Welsh Library Standards. They have contributed to increased levels of funding for libraries in Wales compared to England and Scotland, increased levels of use. The fifth framework has only just started, and that's the one somebody was mentioning earlier, that is very much outcomes and impact based. It does have some input measures in it, but the standards and the targets are primarily about outcomes and impacts. But, big but, public austerity libraries are not immune to cuts, even in Wales, even with the library standards. They've still got to face this unfortunate reality for local government. The Welsh Government's sort of response to that, if you like, was initially the National Assembly for Wales Communities, Equality and Local Government Committee short inquiry, a parliamentary inquiry which looked at effectively what was going on in public libraries in Wales. It was primarily looking at the impact of cuts rather than future models. It had a slightly different focus to our review. It reported in July of this year, and we were able to take its recommendations into account in our review. We started in March. The review was actually announced in December of last year, so a year ago. But we started work in March and worked through until August. The report was published in November. This is what it looks like. It's also in English, the other way up. They're very good at that in Wales. And it's available on the website. There's a web address at the end of the presentation for where you can find it. As you've been told, I was the chair of the panel. My co-panel members, to whom many thanks are due, were Dr. Steve Davis at Cardiff University, Peter Gomer from the Welsh Local Government Association, and Professor Harl Roberts from Aberystwyth. And we had a twofold terms of reference to review the proposed changes to the delivery of services starting last April, and to look into the future and identify potential future sustainable models, and the key was on sustainable models. So what did we find? In the first strand, we found that the reduced funding that was being proposed was going to have a significant impact, and that alongside that there was a fairly limited opportunity for generating fresh income from traditional public library services. There is a very strong ethos of services free at the point of use in Wales. They don't like charging for anything if they can possibly help it. There was a very varying standard of consultation linked to the timescales within which authorities were required to make proposals. There was also very little evidence of linking library reviews to wider strategic planning, and there was very little evidence of library strategic plans being evidenced in wider local authority strategic planning, which was of some concern to the panel members. And as I've already said, the performance against the standards was projected to be very much poorer, particularly with regard to the levels of staffing that are set out in the standards. That was going to be a big issue. On the second strand, we looked at the various drivers for change. The demographic trends are much the same in Wales as they are in the rest of the UK, with an ageing population. Wales is also under threat of, I suppose, local government reorganisation. The Commission on Public Service Governance and Delivery produced a report, colloquially known as the Williams Report, which has proposed a reduction from 22 down to 10 local authorities in Wales. This will inevitably impact on libraries, because libraries are delivered by local authorities, but it won't happen for another 2 to 3 years at least, and that's a big issue. Technology, we've already heard today about the Betamax of technology and the issues that arises, that brings with it, and the issues of librarians being able to keep up to date with the technology that users nowadays expect them to know about. The sustainable models that we looked at, we felt that collaboration was going to be very, very important, both between local authorities or between libraries in delivering specialist services, and not just between public libraries, but between public and academic libraries and HE libraries, and also within local authorities in some of the back office functions. There have got to be ways of not working harder, but working smarter. And community involvement is there to stay, whether we like it or not. It's going to be there, so let's make the best possible use of it to improve and enhance our services, not to replace the librarians. And the final point we felt was that doing nothing was not an option. If we did nothing, then our view was that in the medium term there would be very little left, and in the long term there would be nothing left. We made 11 recommendations in 3 broad areas, the first 2 really relating to the first part of our review, because that's where we felt that we could make most difference. And I'm going to very quickly run through those in the next few minutes. The full detail and all the reasoning, of course, is in our report. And I apologise now for the acronyms. WG is the Welsh Government, WLGA the Welsh Local Government Association. There is a duty to consult. All the local authorities that we looked at did. But the extent of that consultation and the quality of that consultation process varied hugely across Wales. There is guidance out there. In particular, the Welsh Local Government Association has guidance for local authorities undertaking consultation exercises. This didn't seem to be well known about within libraries, and so one of our first recommendations is that this needs to be promoted and pushed out a lot more. Similarly, in the same sort of vein, there is the equality impact assessment. Again, we felt that equality impact assessments were being carried out, but in some authorities these look very much like a tick box exercise. Oh yes, we've done that. Tick all those boxes, now we can go ahead and close our libraries and reduce the mobile service and shift out the housebound and all these things. Again, there is good practice guidance out there. The NHS is quite hot on this, and so again we felt that this needs to be brought to libraries' attention, and training should be available and delivered specifically for libraries. The third thing was that libraries need to think about proposing changes, and they need to think about the costs of those changes. In particular, identifying appropriate timescales, completing the impact assessments and taking notice of the impact assessments, acting on the results. This seemed like a revolutionary idea in some authorities. And they also need to consider the opportunities for collaborative working with neighbouring authorities or alternative delivery partners. Those things were not being looked at. There were 3 authorities in particular that we thought were proposing interesting things. At one end of the scale, I'm not going to say which is which, one of them was proposing a wholesale handover to volunteers. Here you are, bye-bye, thank you very much. At the other, one of the authorities is looking at a model of an independent trust taking over the service. The third is going somewhere in between with more library support for a community service. So we felt that that Kamal should look into these libraries, assess the impact of changes, find out in detail, do some research onto what is happening, so that the lessons learned could be applied in other places that were a bit further behind. These 3 authorities were quite well advanced in their progress. We also thought that libraries should develop an evidence and outcomes-based strategy. Not library plans by another name, but because we found such little evidence of joined-up thinking between libraries and wider local authority plans, we felt that the majority of the evidence we received would have benefited from being evidenced in the context of strategic planning, and it wasn't. There were examples of good practice. There are 1 or 2 in our report that are held up as potentials for giving good guidance to local authorities. We need a workforce development plan. There are a lot of changes in the way. There needs to be a review of the workforce development, and it should also address issues such as recruitment and retention of library staff and the relative shortage of Welsh language skills in some areas. The evidence with regard to volunteers suggested that many local authorities didn't really quite know how to handle the volunteers they were getting. There is training available for libraries in working with volunteers. There is training available for volunteers, particularly developed in collaboration with the museum sector in Wales. So we felt that volunteers do need to be used and supported in a way that helps and supports libraries. Not to take over libraries, but to support the services that you are providing. Another strategic area was that we need to look at collaboration. As I've already said, collaboration between local authority departments and across local authority boundaries and with other public sector libraries. And the panel felt that this was so important that it needed teeth. And the Minister in Wales does occasionally look at what's going on in his library sector. And although there has not to date been any formal intervention in libraries in Wales, there have been informal interventions and wrappings over the knuckles. And so we think that in doing his reviews, the Minister should take into account the record of collaborative service delivery when he's looking at libraries. The evidence on community managed libraries across the UK was very mixed. We identified 4 broad models in operation within Wales. There are 3 broad models in that are reported on in the SIPFA returns. The libraries that we spoke to continually asked us for guidance on what could they count. Could these community managed libraries, and it's not a term that we liked, could they be considered part of the statutory provision? Don't forget, we've got a statutory provision, we've got standards to meet in Wales, and so this is important. We felt that that was not appropriate. It can't be done. And as such, if they're not part of statutory provision, they can't be included under the Welsh Library standards. That said, there need to be some guidelines into the circumstances in which community-supported libraries, not community-managed, but community-supported libraries, could be considered as part of statutory provision. Again, there are 1 or 2 authorities that are beginning to develop the kind of partnership agreements that would allow this to happen, and work is going on within Wales at the moment to see how this might be taken forward. In terms of building for the future, greater collaboration between authorities, top of the list. We can't do all this change at once. The models for local government, that's going to have to be an ongoing commitment. I've already said that there are going to be changes, but we can't afford to wait for the changes to take effect. There's going to be planning blight if we do, and that would be worse than doing nothing. There was a lot of support for a consortium approach to delivery within Wales. They already have quite a few national consortium agreements, and the largest, when we asked for contributions on what should Welsh Library Services look like in 5 years' time, a nationally coordinated service, a national element, was one of the things that came up most often in the responses to the consultation from libraries, from stakeholders, from all sides. A nationally coordinated service was seen as being the ultimate goal. Slightly more immediately, there was a strong feeling that the Welsh Public Library Standard should be incorporated as statutory guidance in relation to the 1964 Act. And having looked at particularly some Scandinavian countries, we felt that there was scope for introducing updated legislation, and that is being actively considered at the moment. So I think my time is just about up. Libraries change by evolution, not revolution. They need to continually evolve. They need to change. The world would not be the same without libraries, but it doesn't mean that libraries have to stay the same. They need to change to be fit for purpose in the 21st century, but still to provide the services that users need. Users are at the heart of it all. Thank you, and that's where you can find the link.
Thank you, Claire, very much. We will, I hope, be able to put slides on the Speaking Up for Libraries website.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So, all those notes you were taking. We're going to have to crack on, because I do want to try and finish this session by the appointed time. If we get a chance at the end for contributions or questions to either of the speakers, we will take them, but otherwise I'm afraid you have to touch them afterwards or something. The second speaker is Sieghart, who is, well, I hope well known to many of you ever since her days in the first intervention by the Secretary of State in the world, but has since then been doing a lot of work in and around libraries, and has been a member of the Sieghart review inquiry into the public library service in England. And again, I will hand straight over to Sue.
Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for inviting me to join you at the Speak Up for Libraries conference. It's practically a year, in fact, I think a year next week, since I got a formal invite from Ed Vaizey, the Minister for Culture, and his counterpart in Communities and Local Government, then Brandon Lewis, to be a member of William Sieghart's advisory panel, supporting his review on how public libraries in England can work best in the future. Now, most of you will know that William had also completed a piece of work for DCMS on looking at pilots around the digital reading issue, e-lending review. And his panel is primarily the same, which is Janine Cox, Rowley Keating from the British Library, Caroline Michelle, Stephen Page, Joanna Trollope, and Luke Johnson, the entrepreneur and author, and myself were additions to this panel who had worked together before. It's been an absolute pleasure working with them. I'm sure you want to know when the report will be published. The only answer I can give is soon. I can't produce a copy of anything in Welsh or any other language. I'm very sorry about that. When I agreed to do this slot, both William and I were pretty convinced that everything would be in the public domain. But he has talked to many settings about some of the issues. What I want to do today is to give you my personal take on the messages that came through during our work, some priority areas for action, and if there's time, to suggest how we might all work together to take some of those priorities forward. If there's questions I can't answer, Anna Wadsworth, who has supported the panel throughout, who's working for both DCMS and DCLG on this, is sitting at the back, willing to help me. She's been a fantastic support to us. We read over 200 submissions of written evidence from individuals moving testimonies about the huge difference libraries have made to their lives, from professionals, quite a lot of people in the middle of the service, not just heads of service, who'd written in their own capacity, community partners, people running voluntary libraries, key stakeholders, including many of you here. We took formal evidence, verbal evidence, and have taken the opportunity to visit as many individual libraries as possible and talk to people about the review. We've all done that, but William in particular took to the road for months, visiting scores of libraries and talking to those responsible for the service everywhere he went. He's spoken to just about every government minister possible during the course of this review. He's been outstanding in the effort he's put into this. One of the key themes that we heard loud and clear, and the proof is in the pudding, is please do not give us another tome that will prop open a door or sit on a shelf. I can assure you that none of us have the appetite to do anything of the kind, and we have focused, therefore, in our thinking about practical initiatives that could make a difference in the foreseeable future. We haven't gone down the route of exactly how would you amend the Act or anything like that. The next really big theme that hit us all loud and clear was the importance of the digital offer, which we've discussed a lot today already. We heard just how vital the digital offer is to a substantial body of people. In the words of one professional, those who cannot afford to be online at home must not be forgotten. We also heard the immense and intense demands being placed on frontline library staff to help individuals who are relying on the library to access the web, to complete job applications, homework, universal credit. I remember meeting a member of staff in a library in Devon who said, you know, she'd just been helping someone, all they needed was a cleaning job, but to get that, they needed to do that online. So I know you're very aware of these issues too. But it goes beyond the importance of digital connectivity to the most needy, although that's important. We heard very strongly that Wi-Fi is fundamental to the delivery of a modern library service for absolutely everybody. There are amazing initiatives underway to enhance the digital offer that many of you are involved in with the British Library and others. But that is fundamentally dependent on a system that is comprehensive, connected, and easy to use. And the reality we found is that the infrastructure for a modern connected library service is under too much pressure. In some places, particularly some rural communities, it's just not there at all. So the quality of the library offer is going to be as good as the digital offer can be, and must be attractive to the modern customer and able them to take advantage of both the national and the international offers that are there. The next big issue that came through was leadership. There are superb efforts being made by many here to take a real championing role in relation to public libraries. But we all recognise that many of us have trouble convincing decision makers and opinion formers, and including some of our friends, that libraries are still needed, that we're not just defending yesterday's service. This happens to me, as I'm sure it does to you. Most people are far too polite to say this to me. But in the words of one politician who I met on her town hall steps, Laura, what are you doing again here, Sue? I hope you're not here about libraries. If you are, isn't it time you got a life? So I think this has come up a lot today. We have to be aware of this backdrop we've got to convincing policymakers in both national and central government about the role of public libraries. My take on this is the need for very clear messaging around this is absolutely critical, because in many places, this is my take, the argument for saving the buildings is being won. What is more at risk, I think, is ensuring that the service is capable of delivering its promise of enabling first-class access to knowledge, skills, and the world of reading. It's the content that's going to matter in the next few years. And also, as we know, not yet has the case been made for libraries to be the delivery point for a number of key services. But I think the opportunity is absolutely now. If I'm right, that most local authorities not all, are somehow managing to hang on to the building infrastructure, then there are big opportunities about, well, if this is the case, how can we make this work? We know that the financial crisis facing local authorities put many services under pressure, but we still think that more can be done to encourage efficiencies through shared procurement and know-how without insisting on a single approach. So, in summary, we're worried that the very localness, the very fact that local libraries are absolutely glued to their local communities is also a point of vulnerability when it comes to delivering a connected service that everybody sees as the first port of call. But I really think the opportunity is now for that. We also have discussed a lot the need for constructive partnerships with local communities who are working to help sustain the libraries they care about so much. And these partnerships need to be based on mutual respect and trust, building on the best learning across the country. We've seen what goes wrong when it's an us and them approach, when it's a take it or leave it approach. Many councillors I've talked to who have gone down the route of partnership model for some or more of their community libraries wouldn't go back. because the benefits they're getting and the satisfaction from local people has actually increased, even if there's a debate about the savings. So above all, we need to agree a shared sense of direction for libraries going forward that everybody can sign up to. And our ideas, although we've called them separately, are coalescing around 4 key themes. We want to see a nationally led drive to upgrade digital connectivity in libraries so the service can fulfil its core remit in the 21st century. We want to see a concerted push for training, building on the model of Teach First for libraries, but accelerating libraries' work in digital inclusion and in community enablement. We think there does need to be a clearer way forward on partnering with communities involved in the public library service, with clear guidelines that build on the range of expertise that's out there now. And we need to make much more effort nationally to accelerate good practice and market the service, particularly to new generations of users. So how should this be done? We've seen the perils of advisory bodies or coming together voluntarily. We're arguing for a dedicated task force with all the key players responsible for delivering the various strands to work together to deliver very practical change at a very fast pace. We need a robust partnership where everyone who wants to make a difference in libraries agrees on those priority actions and does their best to positively promote a consistent message that talks the service up. And by the way, I think this A to Z that's been published this week is absolutely fantastic contribution to that. The world hasn't stood still since the panel's work was launched. We were influenced by the national strategy in Ireland, and now we have the Welsh panel's report. SCL and others have made huge progress, backed by the Arts Council, on digital skills, and so many here have given their personal time to campaign, inform, and sustain the offer. I think it will be very exciting. I hope that the report is just weeks away from publication now, and then we can get on to delivery. Thank you very much for listening.
In keeping with the standards set for the rest of the day, we've managed to save some time. So I'll have to do an hour. So we've got about 10, 15 minutes for questions and comments, and there's one there. Hang on, there's a mic coming.
It's a question about teeth again, because, for example, the A to Z that you just mentioned, I put it forward to our very stretched library service in Lincolnshire that doesn't have enough money to promote or market anything it does. I was told it was too political and wouldn't be used. So, if we've got stuff out there, it would be nice to know how we can encourage some of our services to use it.
I won't ask you to comment unless you feel you have something to say. I suspect we're all still stunned by the. Anybody else? Surely. Oh, go on then. I mean, not go on then. Please. No. Sorry. No. There's one there and one there.
It was really a question on the Welsh report. You were talking about community managed libraries and you're sort of saying they're okay at the moment. That rather implied they would be alright in the future. Or they might be.
We felt that there may be some models that would work,
Right.
that could be sustainable, but much more along the line of partnership libraries with equal input from a formal community body and the library service working together.
That's, in fact, was my question really, what's a community managed library? Because the problem is definition, I think.
The problem is definition.
Yeah.
If you
talk about totally independent, I can see where you're coming from.
I think there are as many definitions, as many different types of community managed libraries as there are libraries.
Yeah.
There are no two the same almost, and it's very difficult. And until there is some uniformity, some kind of standards, the Welsh Government review came up with a recommendation for accrediting libraries in the same way that museums can be accredited. We didn't think that was necessarily a very good idea because just add another layer of sort of bureaucracy on the top, but we could see where they were coming from.
Two things. Just to say that I too tried to use the library to say, and I was told it was too political. I didn't see anything political about it, but it just shows how risk-averse councils are. From my point of view, I'd be really appreciative if we could say what's the one clear message. If I'm talking to a councillor or politician, what's the one clear message about public libraries that you think I should get in? Thank you.
What we in the group this morning were talking about the elevator pitch, but not quite the elevator pitch, the elevator message.
I think I would pick up that quote I put at the end. The world would not be the same without libraries. It's part of a longer quote. If you look in the report, there's a very nice little piece from a library user about the impact that libraries have had on her family.
Sue, do you want to?
I think I would say that libraries have got a key role in promoting digital inclusion. And it shouldn't take the judge in the Lincolnshire judgment to say that public libraries act clearly if interpreted today and it meant access to digital.
Okay, I'm going to take this person down here and then lady at the back.
I just want to further Claire's comment and say that if libraries didn't exist, you would have to invent them.
Take the comment at the back.
I just wondered if you can clarify what you meant about partnerships, specific private partnerships, sponsors or community groups or volunteers. That seems to me a lot better.
Yes. I was really meaning community partnered libraries without getting stuck in the jargon. The panel had as many misgivings as you did about those libraries that are completely independent from the local authority in terms of their sustainability, if that helps you. So I could mean other things, but I was actually meaning where communities are involved in the management and delivery of at least part of the service, but where they are supported in some way by the local authorities too.
Is there a Welsh version of that?
Yeah, I think the Welsh version is really quite similar. We felt that a partnership would have some kind of formal agreement behind it, and that there would be a commitment on two sides. One side would be the library, the other side could be anybody. It could be a local council, a parish council, a community group, but a formally constituted body which was able to enter into a legally binding partnership agreement to run library services.
Darren. Guy?
The question is not really to Sue, but I'm sure the Welsh will team as well. You've made a lot about digital inclusion. What about the important role, emerging role of libraries in learning, much of which is now based in the digital world, in order to have a flexible modern workforce and thus a growing economy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I haven't covered every aspect of the report, but in order to be an effective vehicle for learning and accessing MOOCs and so on, then the digital offer has to be good enough. I suppose anecdotally, William, when he's visited libraries, has just seen so many staff complain about how clunky the system has got, particularly those relying on the people's network models. Many others have, of course, upgraded their kit completely, but it has to be good enough for people to use to do precisely that.
Yes, in Wales there is already a lot of collaborative working between public and higher education libraries, and the National Library of Wales plays a coordinating role in delivering digital services throughout the public library system in Wales.
Here on.
Sitting here in CILIP, I think it's worth acknowledging that a quarter of the CILIP membership, some 3,000 plus people, are public library people, but people working in many quarters of life, not least the House of Commons Library, which provides an excellent service from members to members of Parliament and people who are here today. Libraries exist and operate in all walks of life, and I think one area that would benefit the public library sector would be recognition of the library's role in giving people access to information for living. I don't mean benefits as such, we obviously that. But I mean the information that allows us to be active citizens, both in the workforce, as Darren just mentioned, and in our lives as members of the communities that we so frequently talk about. I think that's really important. The other thing, since I'm on for me, just the thing you just mentioned, both Claire and I have been involved in the Maple project, Maple standing for Managing Public Access to the Internet Public Library Grants, where a lot of the control of what the public can access in the public library IT system, regardless of the quality of the technology, is actually not in the hands of the library managers and the librarians, but in the hands of the IT people in the city, or indeed their outsourced organisations, such as in one big city in the middle region, where it's a private sector company that determines what people can do and access with their IT. So that's a sort of second part of the answer.
I'm going to take one last comment from the floor, and then I'm going to ask you both to come back to the lady in blue.
I just wonder whether either report does or will mention reading books for pleasure. Do they? Does she?
I don't think the Welsh report does specifically, no, but it doesn't mention reading books for any other purpose either. So we're not singling anything out, yes, I'm trying to remember what we did. We certainly talk about the digital inclusion issue, which is a big issue in Wales and part of the Welsh Government's agenda. And I think it is taken for granted that libraries will continue to be about books.
Can I suggest it's possibly not safe to take
Possibly not. Possibly not. You should have been submitting evidence.
Move to Wales.
I should just say a bit more about the panel's support for libraries as the community hub in their community. And I think that, and that by which I mean physical space connected in with the digital world. And as part of that is both the information aspects that John mentioned, but also, of course, the vital role that libraries have in promoting and encouraging reading for pleasure, people of all ages. Thank you for reminding me that is covered in the report that might be coming out soon.
Allegedly. Just the words okay. I think I'm going to have to call a halt there. I'm sure we could go on as we could have done this afternoon and indeed this morning. So just like to thank Claire and Sue for coming along, telling us about the report, about what she can about the report in one case, and show your appreciation. In a second, Alan's going to close the conference.
The other way to show your appreciation is you have feedback form in your pack, and we really would like to have those filled in and given back. Now, Alan.
Not now. One of the three things I was going to say. Now, we've got to think about the two boxes. One for your feedback form that you can also and another one for your badges, which we would like to recycle. The other thing I just wanted to say is we asked when you booked for people's contact details if they were representing anybody and email addresses if your repairs have been published. Certainly the version of the pack that I got didn't have a list of attendees and contact details. So I think, I'm looking at Elizabeth, that we will have to remedy that after the event. So we will do that so that if you didn't catch each other's details, you will be able to access it.
And if anyone's got any photos or anything that they'd like to send for us to use, that would be great as well. On the website.
That's the end of the housekeeping. Oh, as well.
Cool, okay. Right, certain simple propositions for everybody's here. I think this is the third time we've held this national conference. I have to admit, a couple of years ago, I thought we were bonkers to repeat it. I think we were excellent to repeat it. Libraries work. They make people literate. Here's some evidence. Note, several government ministers or local councils could use this genuine evidence to support their own decisions. Enjoyment of reading has a greater impact on a child's educational achievement than their parents' socio-economic status. Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development Reading for Change 2002. Children who read for pleasure make more progress in maths, vocabulary and spelling between the ages of 10 and 16 than those who rarely read. Institute of Education 2013. Overall, young people who enjoy reading very much are nearly 5 times as likely to read at the expected level for their age compared with young people who do not enjoy reading at all. Children's and Young People's Reading Today, 2012. It goes on and on and on. The evidence is there. There is virtually no evidence that purely volunteer libraries are effective, and yet that happens. There is virtually no evidence that austerity works. There's actually quite a lot of evidence that at the moment the economy is more or less flatlining with certain skips, that most people are working in part-time jobs, that most countries in the world are doing better than us in maintaining their public services, and yet we carry out austerity without any question. In other words, on things like libraries where we have volumes of international evidence that they work, we do sod all, and on many things that are experiments that we leap into with boots, we carry on and we slash people's livings. This to me seems ludicrous. Libraries work because reading is not about orthography alone, and it doesn't matter whether it's electronic or physical. It is about immersion.